So today we are going to be looking at the life and times of King Louis XIV of France, commonly referred to as the Sun King. Europe had never seen a monarch like Louis XIV before, and the world in which he created at his grand palace of Versailles was like that could never be imagined. I always say to my students when they ask me, where's one place you would have liked to have visited? I would have loved to have gone to Versailles and seen it in all its glory under that of Louis XIV. Now, one can't talk about Louis XIV without talking about the concept or idea of the divine right of kings. This new trend of monarchy began to develop during the Renaissance, and we see it kind of continue to grow during the Reformation into those wars of religion. The monarchs of Europe decided that they not only ruled because of their hereditary or military might, but they started to decide that they ruled by divine right. And what that means is that they were given the right to govern through God. Therefore, they were God on earth. The simple idea was, God put me here to be king because I was born to a royal family. So it's part of a greater plan. King James I of England, who we've looked at already, said in a speech to the House of Commons, kings are not only God's lieutenants upon earth and sit upon God's throne, but they exercise a manner or resemblance of divine power on earth. So it's no surprise that absolute monarchs possessed total power, and they're not going to be hindered by a constitution, a parliament, or any other agency within their country. Matter of fact, a lot of these divine monarchs, these absolute monarchs, saw themselves to be on par with that of the church itself. These absolute monarchs are going to dominate all social and political institutions, including, as I said, the church and the aristocracy. As a result, the people, as well as the land, were considered to be the property of the monarch, and he or she could do with them what they wished. And what that kind of means is that the monarch themselves come to represent the embodiment of the nation state. In France, this gets started under Louis XIII, and that's mainly because of Cardinal Richelieu. And we've looked at Louis XIII and seen how Richelieu worked hard to ensure that his monarch wasn't going to be burdened by that of the aristocracy. They watched the French wars of religion unfold, and they knew the dangers of having a powerful nobility. So, as we've looked at, curtailing the power of the nobility means you have to elevate the power of the king. You have to make them appointed by God, because once a king's appointed by God, it's going to be harder to justify getting rid of them. Now, this doesn't reach its pinnacle under Louis XIII. That's probably because of the issues and problems that Louis XIII had during his reign and how people saw Richelieu. But it's going to be Louis XIII's son, Louis XIV, who is really going to come to embody, this whole ideal of absolute monarchy in its purest and probably its most successful form. It all starts with Louis XIV, but it didn't have an easy beginning. Louis XIV's childhood was not one of the easiest reigns, and it looked like that it was almost doomed to fail before it even began. So young King Louis XIV would be born on September the 5th, 1638. And, he's born into a France that is one that's undergoing a lot of turmoil. However, his birth is seen as being a miracle, as Louis XIII and his wife, who was a Habsburg queen by the name of Anne of Austria, had been married for 23 years, and he's the first child that they end up having. He would also have a younger brother 2 years later by the name of Philippe, who would sadly die in 1701. He was a pretty interesting fellow himself. Now, young Louis XIV is going to be born into a France that is undergoing a lot of turmoil. The nobility is really working hard to try to undermine the growth of absolute monarchy which exists there. And there's going to be this crisis. It's not a revolution. It's not a civil war like we've seen. It is really kind of a crisis, an uprising, and France is going to be plunged into this period called Le Fronde, and Louis, when he's a little boy, has to experience this. Perhaps one of the most dramatic events that's going to happen to young Louis the 14th prior to him becoming king is his family is actually forced to escape as the nobles are working their way to capture the king and the young Dauphin or prince. The hope was that they could undermine this growth of absolute monarchy, and the royal family just barely escapes. But this fear of a noble uprising and this fear of losing power and this reminder of how hopeless he felt is going to stick with Louis XIV and is going to be a major factor in how he deals with the nobility moving forward. Now, when Louis the 14th is 4, his father passes away. The year prior to that, Richelieu passed away, but Louis is 4 years old. So obviously he can't rule. What ends up happening is we end up having a regency council put into place to rule on the young king's behalf. Anne is going to serve as the regent, so she's the de facto ruler of France. But she's not really capable of doing this rule, so she's going to rely very heavily on a cardinal who worked under Richelieu, who learned from Richelieu by the name of Cardinal Jules Mazarin. And the two of them are going to work very hard to continue to keep in place that idea of absolute monarchy that was created, really kind of starting with Henry IV, but really kind of pushed forward by Louis XIII and Richelieu. And Anne and Mazarin are going to have to continue to face a number of conflicts as the nobility is going to really push back against, all of the changes they're trying to make. Mazarin really kind of worked hard to continue to suppress this revolt, and it's going to take him about 10 years. He is going to be, very much so hated. He's also going to have to deal with France being at war with Habsburg Spain. So, in order to do all of this, he was kind of cast in the role as a villain, and he is going to, use the 30 Years' War as an opportunity to, continue to burden the nobility with high taxes, and they are going to push against that, and they're going to push against that right up until the point where Louis XIV will come of age and be able to take the throne, when he has his official coronation.